Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're so glad to have you here. We're just going to give it a moment and let everyone filter in before we go ahead and get started. While we're waiting, of course, if you'd like to drop in the chat where you're joining us from, whether you're coming from a cultural institution, nonprofit organization, academic institution, or if you're a consultant, student, we'd love to, learn more a little bit about you. And while we're waiting, a little bit of housekeeping for today. Today's session is going to be recorded, so if you need to step away, you'll be able to catch up on anything that you miss. We'll have a few polls throughout the presentation today, and then of course we'll save Q&A for the end. Please drop any questions that you have in the Q&A box anytime throughout today's session, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end. We're getting folks from all over the place. Welcome, welcome, everyone. We will just give it another minute. All right, while we go ahead and get started, welcome everyone. I'm Alex Cron, Community Manager for Terentia, and I'm so glad to have you all here with us today. Helping to facilitate this webinar with me is Lauren Turner, our Marketing Manager, and Craig Bolig, our Chief Revenue Officer. Now, if we go to our next slide, I'd like to talk a little bit about Terentia before we dive in. And of course, before I turn this over to our speakers, I just want to introduce Terentia and talk about who we are and why we're here today. Terentia provides a digital asset management system built specifically for GLAMP and nonprofit institutions, organizations managing collections, complex collections, archives, media, and institutional knowledge. Our work is shaped by the realities that you face every day, stewarding collections data, preserving context, supporting access, respecting data sovereignty, and ensuring that your digital assets remain usable over time. Now, while this webinar is hosted by Terentia, and yes, we do hope that some of you consider us in your future evaluations process, today really is just genuinely about helping make that process a lot clearer and easier for you all. And that's what we're here today to create that space for an honest and practical conversation about the DAMS selection journey and to share insights that can help make you make the right decisions for your institution. And our guest speakers today will walk through their experiences, what worked, what surprised them, and what they would do differently. And our role today, Terentia's role today, is just to hold that space for that conversation. Now, if we go to our next slide, I'd like to talk a little bit about where Terentia is heading this year. We'll be at Museums and Heritage, AAM, SAA, TribalNet, and ATOM conferences this year. And we'd love to connect in person if you're attending. So please feel free to stop by our booth and say hi, whether you want to talk through your DAM questions, learn more about Terentia, or just put a face to the name. We'd love to meet you. And also, I'd love to talk about our upcoming webinars. So before I introduce Molly and Jacques, I'd like to share that if you want to stay in the loop on what we are up to, the best way to do that is to sign up for Terentia's newsletter. I'm going to drop the link for that in our chat. And we'd love for you to be able to, sign up for that newsletter and stay up to date on upcoming webinars. For our next webinar coming June 10th, we have invited Nick Honeysett from the Balboa Park Online Collaborative, who is coming back to do a deep dive into AI policymaking. He previously joined us for a series focused on AI last January. You can check out the recordings from that webinar series and other previous webinars that we've had on our website. We'll be promoting registration for that webinar with Nick through our newsletter and social medias coming soon. Now, I would love to introduce our speakers. I'm really glad to have these two colleagues from Nasher Sculpture Center joining us today. And I say colleagues because really that's how we want this conversation to feel today. First up, we have Jacques Haba. Head of Digital Operations and Strategy at the Nasher Sculpture Center. Jacques brings over 14 years of experience in cultural heritage, and his work is exactly the kind that we don't talk enough about in this sector, the kind of behind the scenes infrastructure work that makes everything, else really possible. He, along with Molly, led the implementation of Nasher's first DAMS, which is really the heart of what we're here to discuss today. And of course, I'd love to introduce Molly Tepera, the Nasher's digital asset specialist. Molly brings a library and archives background to her role. She holds an MLIS from the University of North Texas and became a certified archivist in 2003. She is the person living inside the system day to day, and her perspective on what really actually works in practice is incredibly invaluable to our session today. And we are so lucky to have both the strategic and operational views in the same conversation. Jacques and Molly, thank you so much for being here today. Jacques, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, I want to just thank everybody for showing up today. I appreciate your time. Hopefully, there's some value in that you take away from this and in your journey of buying a DAMS. Um, Let me set the stage, and then I'll pass it off to Molly, who will get into the real meat of our digital asset manager system. So we are at the Nasher Sculpture Center. For those of you who don't know, we're located in Dallas, Texas. We are actually in the heart of the Arts District. Molly, if you want to change the slide. Yeah, so we are right in the heart of the Arts District where we have the Dallas Museum of Art on one end and Trammell Crow across the street. So and then behind us is the Clyde Warren Park. So we're in a hub of just excitement and energy for culture. The Nasher opened in 2003, so we're relatively new, young institution. We're just about to hit 25 years old. So that puts things in perspective. We are a small to mid-sized museum, so that also kind of sets the tone for the kind of issues and challenges that we faced. So the Nasher Sculpture Center was started by Ray and Patsy Nasher. It was their private collection, and if y'all are familiar with Dallas, Ray Nasher was a real estate developer who opened in the 50s North Park Center. And North Park Center was unique in that it was retail, but had artworks inside this retail space. So very much what Ray wanted to accomplish was to make art accessible, that art was meant to be lived with. He talked about his own collection as part of the family. And so in 2003, he was like, let me share my part of the family. Let me share what our private collection. So this is when the Nasher Sculpture Center opened. I was hired in 2011 to redo their website. So this was the kind of first touch point in digital transformation that the Nasher was about to experience. I think they didn't realize what they were getting when they hired me because as I started doing the web development, which was my background, it started to uncover a lot of the things which is probably why you're here today. We started uncovering that we had a lot of content, we had a lot of assets. They were scattered across different domains, and we were producing more content. So as I was working cross-departmentally, I started advocating and saying, hey, we need a way to, the same way that we manage our collection, we need a way to manage all of these marketing and production assets, these pieces that help tell a story about the collection. Where are we housing those? And so I got to work and started looking at some options of like, well, maybe we can do this open source. And I looked at DSpace, for example, and the DSpace is an open source product, but with open source products, you have things like, do you have the DevOps in place to implement it? Do you have the security hardening that's going to be required? Where are you going to host this? So it checked a lot. My role checked a lot of boxes to fulfill it, but then we ended up very soon realizing that we had some barriers to overcome. Next slide. I think this is a great time, Alex, to pull up one of the polls that we have.
Excellent. So our first poll for today is, what is the primary challenge that's driving your interest in DAMs? What is it? Digital assets are scattered across systems, difficulty finding and retrieving files, lack of metadata standards or consistency, limited public access or discoverability, or are you preparing for AI or future use of your collections? We'll give everybody a chance to respond and then we'll share the results with you all. So far, what
Yeah,
I'm
that's
saying is not entirely surprising to me.
and I can keep going too. So, um, yeah, so we realized, or I realized that in order to set up our asset management system, that there were some hurdles that we were going to have to overcome. And as much as I advocated in probably around 2013, things weren't still aligned just yet. And I think that's a big issue that a lot of um, change management has to deal with, and that is making sure everybody is aligned. And so our inflection point came actually when just the transitions in technology. You know, if you recall back in 2012, social media is on the rise. We're creating content for social media. We're trying to figure out how we can tell stories on social media. YouTube starts to pick up in 2013, 2016. We're transitioning to a new website. We're going to reimage the website in 2018. And and we're realizing like this stuff that we have really does uh, is really scattered. It's not making us efficient. We're having a hard time producing content. We're spending more time in the planning and trying to find things than we are in the actual creation of these stories that we need to create. Um, so yeah, absolutely. Scattered across systems, finding difficulty retrieving files. Alex.
Yeah, yeah. So from our results for those who are watching the recording right now, 37% of those who responded to the poll said digital assets are scattered across systems. 32% said difficulty finding and retrieving files. 12% said lack of standard metadata standards or consistency. Another 12% said limited public access or discoverability. And 7% said preparing for AI or future use of collections. Somebody in the chat also mentioned not so much AI, but getting collections ready for digital facing. Love that. All right, we can go ahead and stop sharing those results.
And next slide, Molly. Thank you. Yeah, so all of those were the things that we were facing as well. At one point, uh, SharePoint rolled onto the scene for us, and so we thought, okay, um, maybe this can be a solution for how we can organize information and discover things. And all it did was just create another repository. So we had Dropbox, we had people's individual hard drives, we had SharePoint now. And so it wasn't until the external factors of audiences demanding more content from institutions and the internal factors of, hey, we need to be a bit more efficient, that's when the alignment happened. And that was our inflection point. And that was when we decided, hey, look, in order to accomplish this, we need to have the time and the resources. And so if you want to go next slide. This is when in, I think it was 2023, we actually created a line item and a budget um, for a digital asset specialist. And then in 2024, in July, we hired the wonderful Molly Tepera. And so I'll hand it over to her and let her explain some of the things that we did during our researching and implementation and how we're maintaining the system today.
All right, thank you for that, Jacques and Alex. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, so I'm just going to go briefly through this timeline. You can see most of our events took place in 2024. So I was hired almost 2 years ago, and right from the get-go, we wanted to begin researching DAMS vendors. So for a couple of months, I spent time researching vendors, using some of the recommendations that Jacques gave me. Alongside that, we were also meeting with our different staff members, our different departments, and I'll go more into that in future slides, but that was a very important part of our process. So sorry, I think I keep jostling my laptop. So After a couple of months, we had narrowed down our choices to just two from originally a quite larger list of vendors, and we presented those top two choices to senior leadership. While we were waiting for their feedback, we began testing with some sandboxes from our top two choices. And then obviously we selected one, and in April of last year, the administrators, Jacques and myself, gained access to the DAMS for the first time.
All right, so time for our next poll. We're going to launch. Lauren, thank you. What have been the biggest barriers moving forward with the dams for you all? Is it budget constraints, internal alignment and stakeholder buy-in, unclear requirements, too many vendor options, decision fatigue, technical or integration concerns? And of course, like if you have, other barriers that are not on here, please feel free to drop those in the chat. I forgot to mention that for our first poll, but please, going forward with all of our polls, please contribute in the chat. We'd love to learn more from y'all.
Never too many barriers, right?
Oh yeah, I see. Yep, time is a really good one there as well. No dedicated staff to devote to it. Lack of understanding why a dams would be helpful. Yeah, these are great. Thank you all. We appreciate your participation. And just so you know, I'm reading these out loud for those who are going to be watching our recording later since they won't be able to see this. Mm-hmm. This is great. Thank you, everyone. All right, let's go ahead and share those results. So 67% of our responses said budget constraints. Yep. 44% said internal alignment and stakeholder buy-in. 31% said unclear requirements. 20% said too many vendor options and decision fatigue, and 34% said technical or integration concerns. And we saw a lot about, time in the chat, as well as, lack of technical knowledge or understanding of why a DAMS would be important or useful. Lengthy procurement processes is also a critical one there too. Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Why don't we go ahead and stop sharing?
Sorry, looks like I was muted there for a second. So I'm going to talk briefly about institutional buy-in, which Jacques touched on at the beginning, but in case it was missed, I really want to emphasize that Jacques had been advocating for my position and for a system for about a decade. Obviously, I hope that it's a little bit easier for y'all if y'all are looking to buy a new DAMS or looking to exchange, but it's really important to have an advocate who realizes the importance of a system for one, and then I'm sure most of y'all don't have as much time as you'd like, so most people would probably benefit from at least one person to dedicate their time to that new system, if not more. So he'd been advocating for that for a number of years. And then when I joined in July 2024, it took a little bit of time for researching, for planning, for evaluating between when we actually got the system in April 2025. So, in that gap, there were a couple of things that we did to keep up momentum, to keep our staff members and colleagues engaged. And I'll go more into that in the future. But I think it's really important to look for advocates, not just in your own department, the people who realize the need for DAMS, but people who are interested, people who are curious, and get them invested as early as you can in the process. So planning, we spent, I don't even know, it was just a couple months, but it feels like a lot longer planning. And the reason for that is even though we are a small to mid-sized institution, is we do have 8 different departments, and some of those have subgroups within them. And it was really important for us to meet with every single staff member at least once, especially the heads of departments. And we did this during a time where we had from July 2024 to December 2024, I think we had 4 exhibitions going on at different stages. So finding time to speak with everybody, that was a bit of a job of itself. but we knew that we had to get their buy-in and their support if we were going to move forward with this. And of course, we took their feedback very seriously. We used that to then go to the vendors and present specific cases, and we used their feedback to help tailor our search. So we also talked about the exchange of assets and information within the system. So right from the get-go, when I got here, we started doing meetings. So Jacques, who's been here for a number of years, was already somewhat familiar with how some of our staff worked. But for me, I was new to getting a DAMS for the system, and I was also new to the institution. So that was a bit of a roller coaster. And we have had a little bit of staff turnover over the years. So people in a given position may not do things the same as their predecessor. There may not have been, written training documentation for those positions. So for me personally, as a newcomer, that was challenging to learn about who created those assets, who was responsible for them, who reviewed them. So we spent quite a lot of time working with people, for me, getting to know them and their processes, and then incorporating that information into our search. I think we already briefly touched on budgeting for delays, but we had a couple of speed bumps. We had the 4 exhibitions I mentioned where all of our staff was doing a million different things at once, which I'm sure a lot of y'all, even from other types of institutions, can relate to, right? So, budget for delays, don't be frustrated by it. Things come up. I think Jacques and I are both very detail-oriented people, so we may have wanted things to progress sooner than it happened, but that's okay. It's part of the process. So research. So as I mentioned, we spent a couple of months researching from about July 2024 to December 2024 at varying levels. So we started with a list of 68 vendors, and we gradually narrowed it down to 10, and then to 5, and then to our final 2 towards the fall. So we had some, basic points of interest that I'll go into more on the next slide, but among them was looking for vendors that work with cultural institutions, museums that had used a vendor or another vendor and their experience in talking to them. So we spent quite a bit of time doing that research, diving into it, using the feedback from our colleagues, and all that good stuff. So we had meetings, and then we had follow-up meetings as we got more information from our vendors. When we took our initial questions to the vendors, and we took our case studies to them, we'd bring them back to our colleagues and say, "Is this going to work for you? Do you need a different solution? What kind of things can we do to advocate for you and for your workflows?" And I think, depending on your staff and your colleagues, some people are more open to change, and some people are a little bit more reluctant and want to keep to their old systems and their old workflows. And that's totally understandable. We also use this time to try to build trust, especially for me as a newcomer. It was really important for me to establish that, from this point and going forward, even after we get the dams, that we take some of their fears, their anxieties, and also their hopes and expectations, that we took those into account from the very beginning. I think I mentioned we also consulted with some museums. I think we spoke with 4 or 5. Some were art, some were different kinds of museums. And then I also reached out to a couple digital asset managers or specialists in the North Texas area. So our dams and our cultural community was really helpful in this planning phase, providing feedback, helping us figure out what to look for, what to ask for, because I don't know if Jacques mentioned this, but this is our first dams at the Nasher. So I think he did mention that. But we wanted to hit it out of the ballpark on the first time, right? So we did a lot of research, as y'all are beginning to realize. So we ended up contacting 5 different vendors. We brought our preferences, our use cases, our needs for our colleagues, and we reached out to 5 of them. to get some basic information like pricing, basic features, if they used other systems or if they offered other systems besides a digital management system, things like that. And then we ended up experimenting with two sandboxes or demo systems. And I think this is a really important part of the buyer's process because, especially if you have colleagues who are hesitant about switching to a new system, you really need to make sure at least the administrators have tried out the system and that they can test it out for themselves. And if you can get one or two of your power users involved as well, even better. All right, so I mentioned a couple of things that we looked for, but I'll just go through our list real quick. So base features, as I mentioned, some vendors offer things a la carte. So I think it's a good idea to ask what they offer in the base package, right? You're going to bring this to your senior leadership, presumably, and you want to have a good idea of everything they offer before you get the final proposal. As a cultural heritage institution, of course, we're looking at affordability, as I'm sure a lot of y'all are also looking at. We wanted a system that could meet our needs at the best price point to further bolster our case with senior leadership. We were also really interested in the customization of user roles and permissions. So we do have what I'll call some restricted assets. So there is an award that the Nasher Sculpture Center gives out every 2 years. I think we're moving back to 1 year, but we present a prize to an innovative sculptor in the field of contemporary sculpture. And before we make that big announcement, we need to be collecting assets, headshots, press releases before they're released, things like that. And we need to be able to store them in a secure area that's not open to all of our staff members. So having a vendor that could provide highly customizable roles and permissions was really important to us. Again, looking to build that trust with senior staff who are looking to protect their assets and make sure that they're only visible to authorized users. As an art museum, we do use the collection management system, TMS, or the museum system, which I'm sure a lot of y'all are familiar with. So probably one of our top one or two items was looking for a DAMS that could integrate with our collection management system. Our art team was very insistent on that, understandably. So that also made it a little bit easier for us to narrow down that large list that I mentioned originally. Number of users kind of ties into the base package. We are a small to mid-sized institution. We have about 37 users in the system right now, but we don't know where we'll be in 10 years. Maybe we'll be a medium to large size institution. So having the ability to grow in terms of users, excuse me, and also storage was very important to us. As I mentioned, we were interested in a vendor with cultural heritage experience, which is somewhat of a niche field in dams, but obviously very important to us. And we were also really interested in exploring a system that would create ties between our assets and different kinds of records. For us, this would be artworks from our collection, but also exhibitions, events, artists, all kind of things. We wanted to be able to build out really complex relationships to provide more context for our assets and to be able to highlight all of the cool content that we create around these records. And lastly, we were interested in what institutions are using the stamps. Some of the museums we talked to were using older systems that were, really well known in the field. Some were using, it was kind of all over the place. So that was really interesting, but we did try to reach out to people that worked with our top two choices at least. So that's, involving the community, the cultural heritage community, or the DAMS community, and getting that feedback early on.
All right, we're going to go ahead and launch our last poll for today. What is most important to you when evaluating a DAMS? Is it ease of use for staff, integration with existing systems, whether it's your CMS or your online collections, metadata flexibility and standard support, scalability and long-term preservation, cost and pricing structure, of course. And if any of these, if you have additional options you'd love to share in the chat, please share those with us. We'd love to see them. Integrations, yes, absolutely an important one. All of those are important for me when evaluating for DAMS. I can't pick just one. Yeah, I know that one's tough. We wanted you to pick one though. It's a good reason. Data sovereignty is a great one. Yes. Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Let's go ahead and share those results. So we've got 21% ease of use for staff, 36% integration with existing software, 4% metadata flexibility and standard support, 28% scalability and long-term preservation, and 10% for cost and pricing structure. And of course, as a lot of folks have said in the chat already, that oftentimes it's multiple things, not just one. That's important to you when you're evaluating your dams. But we were just really interested in understanding, what was most critical to you. So, all right, let's hand it back over to Molly and Jacques.
Well, that was really cool to see. Obviously, ease of use was important to us too. I didn't include that in our slide, but yeah, we have users that I would say a variety of familiarity with different technologies. So finding a vendor that that can finding a system that is intuitive is also really important. And shout out to the long-term preservation. It's obviously really important in the field of information science. That was also one of our interests, but I wanted to keep it somewhat short. So I'm just going to give you all a couple seconds to look over this chart. This is our 5 vendors that were kind of in our preliminary rounds. So you can see we interviewed everybody. We got a request for proposal from everybody. We got pricing for most folks, and then we did some client interviews with people who were using the system. And we were supposed to get 3 demos, but one vendor was kind of giving us the runaround. So we were like, you know what, 2 is probably fine. But once we kind of hashed out this chart, it made it a lot easier for us to move from 5 and then to 2. So we love a good chart at the Nasher Sculpture Center. All right, so implementation. So y'all may recall there was a couple month gap between when I signed on and then when we got the system. And when we did get the system in April 2025, it would be another couple months after that before we could begin training users. There was a lot of work involved in configuring the system and meeting those customizations that we talked about. So we knew we had to keep our users engaged, especially at a fast-paced institution. So one of the ways that we kept them interested was when we got the system, we sent out a poll to our colleagues. We were like, hey, this is our new system. This is who we went with. Here are some of the features they offer. What do y'all want to call it? And we got some interesting comments. Some wanted to name it for the founders of our collection. Some went with geographical terms. But we finally settled on the Foundry because we are a sculpture center. And of course, that suggestion came out of our wonderful education department. So we ended up going with that. And that was a really fun way to keep interest and make everyone feel like they had a stake in our system. We also built 2 SharePoint sites. One was for administrators, for Jacques and myself, and that is where we kept up with project management, our timelines, a basic ticketing system, and training documentations for admins. Um, Once we got a little bit further along and we started training users, we built a second SharePoint site, which was public facing to our staff. And this is where I begin adding a glossary for our metadata fields, some training videos, um, another ticketing system for reporting errors, a user manual, which is my pride and joy, things like that. Oh, and announcements as well. So if there's system updates, if someone added a batch of really cool assets from our, even the people that didn't have immediate access could at least know what was going on and see that we're still active, we're still building it out, and it's going to be really cool when you're a part of it. So we began training in November 2025 with some of our power users. These were our active content creators, some heads of departments, and some people that might be able to determine whether or not an asset could be used and how it could be used. So that was our first group, and we are now in April. And as of this week, all of our full-time staff will be trained. So we're really excited about that. We do have a couple part-time staff still to train. And then, of course, there will be new training for new staff that have joined after the initial training period, as well as refresher courses periodically. Um, we met with departments and staff again as new things came up. People were like, hey, this is working really well, or hey, I thought this would work differently. So, again, to build that continuing trust, whenever possible, we would take their feedback and then take it to the vendor and say, hey, can we do this? We'd like to add this, we'd like to modify this. And I think that did help with some of our more reluctant users to realize that, this system is for them. We want this to be the digital heart of our ecosystem, and change is scary, but we're trying to not just do
Yeah.
this for us, but for the whole institution to make things a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
Um, let's see, migrating assets. So as Jacques mentioned, we have a couple of different um, digital repositories. We use Dropbox, which I'm sure a lot of y'all are familiar with. We use SharePoint for a lot of operational content, but also things that we would like for the DAMS. We have a couple external hard drives. There's a lot of different platforms. So we are in the process of migrating older content to the Foundry, to our DAMs, as well as encouraging users to add new content just to the DAMs. So that's been, we're still working on it. So once we got the DAMs in April of last year, we had some questions from our users and both for ourselves as we spent more time in the Foundry. So a lot of our users were wanting to know what's going to go in the DAMs. Are my personal records going to go in there? Like, do you want the photos from the staff picnic? So we created a basic guideline for each department of assets that we were interested in, as well as assets that we were not interested in. So, like employee records, financial documents, we don't really want or need those for the DAMs, but any content that could be used and reused by not just the originating department, but by other teams, we were interested in that. So for us, this could be institutional photos and videos for marketing. This could be installation photography of our art collection, toolkits from our educators, press kits from our press teams. So we've built out that basic list, and I had a good discussion with someone, our graphic designer, a couple of weeks ago, and she's like, I don't know if you'll want anything from me because if you're familiar with design files, those can be quite complex. So we were able to work out the design files that we wanted for the Foundry in the appropriate file formats. Um, so that was a good conversation to have. Again, working with our colleagues to determine what the best course is. Um, there have been a lot of questions about what content is going to stay in legacy platforms. So SharePoint's a big part of what our colleagues use. So operational content is probably going to stay in SharePoint or its original home, but we are hoping to migrate a lot of content out of Dropbox, especially. and from some of our older storage units. Those of y'all who work in digital preservation know how fragile digital files are. So we're really trying to move especially the older content from the early 2000s into a safer, more secure, more widely accessible place. And then, excuse me, people wanted to know, kind of on the same note, if the DAMS will replace any of our existing platforms. And the short answer is yes, for some, like Dropbox, but that'll be over the course of several years. But our collection management system, for instance, we're not looking to change that. They serve two separate functions. So it was kind of a case by case basis, but basically our content for production, we all want that in the Foundry, and we're still working to get some of that from our colleagues who have it squirreled away in various places. So I'll try to keep this brief. So we talked about a lot of issues that we had, but there were a lot of accomplishments besides getting the system itself. So a lot of people were excited. We did have some users who were nervous, but we also had a lot of people who were frustrated with their current workflows and who wanted something more efficient, more streamlined, nicer looking. So there was a lot of excitement. So we, especially in that in-between time where we're still mapping out how the system is going to work, Jacques and I tried to lean on advocates in other departments that recognize the need for this system. We came up with a file naming convention. Jacques had actually drafted one back in 2012 or 2013, but this time with the new DAMS, I think people began to see like, oh, this isn't just like another step I have to do. It actually serves a purpose. So we do have a new file naming convention, and I'm training some users on batch renaming assets in Adobe Bridge. So we're just going, having a party with it. It has improved communication. I've had at least a couple of different users, because we're still training, come to me and say, like, I didn't know we had all this content, or I've only seen one image from this photo shoot or one video, and I didn't know there were 100 more. So that's been really exciting. It gets tiresome digging through your email for links from 2 years ago that may or may not be broken. So I mentioned we have 37 users. We may have some more later on. And we have 4,500 assets and growing. I did not include the number of records we have in here for our artworks, exhibitions, events, and more, but 4,500 assets. Um, so we're really excited about that. And then we have a couple ongoing items. It's not a one and done process. We did not integrate the DAMS with our collection management system right away. Um, Jacques and I were like, that's way too much for the first year. So we're working on that. In the future, we're really excited about that. There's going to be some integration with the DAMS on the website, as there's some changes going on with our website as well. So there's a lot of opportunities there. Still have a couple of staff members to be trained, but we've made really good progress. And I would also add, like, take as much time as you need to train your users, because if you don't do it right the first time, they will come back 3 months later and say, I forgot. What do I do? So invest time in your staff, and your colleagues will appreciate you for it. Which goes into building trust, continuing to lean on our advocates. Our social media manager really likes the platform, which I didn't expect, but she's super enthusiastic about it. She's actually helped me train some other folks on it, so it's really nice to have her as a resource. We do still have quite a bit of content in our older systems, but um, migration is a very lengthy process, especially when you have, almost a quarter century of assets across different platforms. So not everything is in the Foundry, but we are making good progress towards moving older content there. So I'm responsible for moving stuff prior to this year into the Foundry, and then all of our trained staff are adding current assets from this year and onwards into the Foundry. So we're kind of approaching it from two different angles. Lastly, I guess I'll end with the importance of excuse me, of the dams and the cultural community. So we've mentioned a couple of times that, we spoke with other museums and cultural institutions for their feedback, for their experiences. I've reached out to a couple specialists in the North Texas area that gave me some good advice. And yeah, so we're hoping that this will help y'all make some decisions. It can be a daunting process, but don't let that stop you. There's a lot of potential with the dams, whether it's your first one or whether you're looking to transition. So we wish you luck with that process. I hope this helped. Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Terentia, and thank you everyone for your time.
Molly, Jacques, wow. Seriously, thank you. Genuinely, your willingness really to share not just, what went well and what was hard, what surprised you, even what you would do differently. Um, Hearing these lessons learned is rare, especially outside of a conference setting, and it's exactly what makes these kinds of peer conversations so valuable to our community. We are here at Terentia. I can speak on behalf of all of us. We are so grateful for your time today. And for those who've joined us today, if anything you heard today sparked questions about Terentia, and you'd like to learn more about the platform, please don't hesitate to reach out. Our community of GLAMP and nonprofit professionals is growing. And if that's something that you'd like to be a part of, we'd love to have you. We'll drop some links in the chat just before we jump into Q&A here. Um, Now, we do have some questions, and so I'm just going to drop a couple links before we move into those. Um, we have some questions in the Q&A, so why don't we go ahead and get that started now that I've dropped those links. We got some great questions in here, so I'm just going to dive right in. So our first question, do you think it's possible to implement a DAMS without having a dedicated staff member work on the project full time? That is a great question.
I think that that is something that I learned early on that it's quite difficult to do. So I was already managing the website back in, the early or mid 2000s. And in order to take on, I would have probably been the primary point person to take on the implementation of the dams. And I knew that if we didn't have which is why we spent so much time in planning, if we didn't set up a solid foundation that we were going to acquire something and then it was going to fall flat and we would be paying something for that we weren't really using. So having that dedicated person was essential to saying, and this is why I lean on Molly so much, and I'm, entirely thankful for her role, is you need that constant communication from somebody. You need that ownership of the product. You need somebody, a person that's talking to all of your departments because it's such a critical piece that works across departments. And so it deserves an individual, deserves somebody on staff to do it.
Yeah, and I'll just come over the top on that. Jacques, you're absolutely right. On the vendor side, we need a point of contact at a minimum, but also, someone who understands the workflows, the processes, the data, and the objectives of the platform. Is it possible? Sure. Is it ideal? No, definitely not. Typically we want a stakeholder or a group of stakeholders that could represent departments in their use cases. If in the case we see this, if capacity is limited, Terentia, and others may as well, but Terentia offers white glove services, admin services, and that can be beyond just initial implementation. We actually do this for customers today where it's ongoing configuration, asset ingestion, workflow management, reporting, and so on. It takes a little bit extra as far as ramp up to really be in two-step with you. But those are cases where the need for the dams is, it's been held back typically because of resource allocation. And like Alex said at the front, our partnerships with our clients are very, very close. We're an extension of their team.
All right. So moving on to our next question. This is a great question because it speaks to your existing TMS. This person's curious what the main factors were for you all that You didn't select TMS's DAM system, TMS Media Studio. Was it as easy as anticipated to integrate with a non-TMS product? I know you already mentioned in your presentation that we haven't gone down that pathway yet, but um, if you could at least speak to a little bit to that first part of the question.
Do you want to take that one, Jacques, or do you want me to
Yeah, I'm
speak
I'm
on
happy
that?
to. So this also echoes something that Molly had already said, but also emphasizes it as well. And while TMS knows the cultural heritage space, they tend to know, well, at least in my opinion, tend to know more about collections than they do the marketing production assets. And so you when you're looking for your vendor, you want somebody who understands cultural heritage. As much as they do understand how digital assets flow within a business. And so we felt like the conversation with the collection management side or managing the assets through the collection management system was kind of like an add-on for them, that their bread and butter was really managing collections, which is very different from digital assets. Um, and then likewise, when you're choosing a vendor, they may be coming from a perspective that understands the digital asset world, but truly needs to understand what cultural heritage does and how that fits into archives and permanent collections. So we yeah, we chose to move in a different direction because we felt like we were going to find a better product that would incorporate the needs that we needed for the marketing and communication side of what we were trying to um, collect and corral.
I realize, Jacques, that you've been leaving some nuggets in the chat for the hosts and panelists and not for the attendees. So feel free to reiterate anything that you've shared already, because I that those are some really key points that you've mentioned. Um, and of course, we've got a bunch of questions, so I'm going to move into the next one, but feel free to pepper those in as you can. um, so this next question is, did migration incur a cost from the DAM vendor?
So
Um,
so we didn't have a migration because this is our first dams. Um, maybe that
yeah,
can be clarified what they meant by migration.
I'm
We
I'll
wondering
do,
get,
if
I was gonna
I
say we
was
can
just
let that
gonna.
one sit and they can edit it if need be, and we could, because we have quite a few other questions we should try and get to. So we'll pause, we'll
Okay.
put a pin in that one. On the implementation slide, this next question, you showed migrating assets from old platforms after training. This is a similar question. So they're
Mm-hmm.
asking if Terentia did not migrate any of the data for you from one format.
We've worked on importing some records from spreadsheets, but as for the assets, that has been on our side. So I've been thus far been the one primarily migrating content from our legacy repositories into our dams, and now we're getting some other staff members involved, but we did not. Um, yeah, it's been a Nasher effort to migrate the content.
yeah, I'll
Okay,
add to
great.
that because it adds a point to why we chose Terentia. And that is a lot of asset management systems will manage the assets, but it becomes a lot harder when you try to take those individual atomic pieces and relate it to an object record. So for example, I have an exhibition, right, that has a description and it's a self-contained, but that exhibition has a lot of things that go with it that are independent and can be related back to it. That relationship between the object record and an asset record was key. And that was something that Trencia had for us that some of the other vendors couldn't quite, or were explaining it in a way that we would have had to kind of finagle people's understanding in terms of like how it would work for the dams that they were going to be looking at, in terms of like an object would be a product, and so it was changing nomenclature for the staff. So that was a key piece. So when we were migrating stuff, like Molly was saying, we had mostly coming from our website I had a lot of object records that I could import, and we worked with Terentia to import a lot of those object records, um, things like artwork objects as well as events and exhibitions. But the assets themselves has been much more hands-on, and kudos to Molly because it has been more hands-on in terms of devising a system and key accountability of what's been transitioned, what we can sign off on. And I mean, the fact that we're already almost, 4,500 assets in is amazing to me. It's a great accomplishment,
Yes,
which is
having
why
an
you need that
object,
dedicated person, you know?
yes, having an object-based dams really does make the difference. And I want to give Craig an opportunity to jump into just because I know he's got a really valuable perspective to share.
Sorry, Alex. I was reading the next question. They're trying to get ahead on it. These are such good questions on it. With the time, we should go to another one.
Yeah, absolutely. So our next question, do you see a dam encompassing the management of digital assets and files for an entire museum or archive organization, including admin, marketing, education, etc., or only focusing on archival and collection management?
Really good question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to answer, Molly? I mean, I can answer, but I mean,
Yeah, so that is the way we've gone about with ours. We intended the dams to be for all departments. We specifically, the need for a dam arose out of our department, out of external affairs, but it is for everyone's use, whether that is our visitor experiences team, our art team, including our curators, or education development. We've got a couple different departments. We are still trying to map out our relationship to our library and archives. The library and archives are both fairly new. They are like less than 2 years old. So we're still figuring out how those two are going to interact. But yeah, we envisioned the system for everyone's use, but it would, I don't want to say primarily benefit external affairs and production, but I think that was where the need was greatest. But obviously, we want everyone to see the benefits of the system.
yeah, visibility was one of our primary objectives, and that came out of you know, the work of interviewing and communicating with the various departments and trying to uncover what their pain points were. And a lot of their pain points when it came to producing, the stories, the editorial content, the communication pieces, the marketing pieces, a lot of it came to we can't find it. We don't know if we can, and if we do find it, we don't know if we can use it. And so the discoverability was something that happened across departments. And so we identified that pain point and said, like, we're going to adopt a system that's going to make it easier and more efficient for all of our departments, for our institution as a whole, to increase their productivity, to make things discoverable again. We don't want to spend time, several hours just looking for something. We want to spend the time actually debating about what needs to be created with all of these things that we've uncovered, right? What story do we want to tell? Not where are we going to find the pieces of the story, but how are we going to tell a story, Um, I would just to pepper in one of the comments that I made, I would not underestimate the value of knowing your workflows, your department's workflows, not just the workflows of the systems, but the actual workflows that people take to produce something. Because those are the key things that you're going to take back to and I know I think Molly said this, is just kind of echoing and reinforcing. You're going to take those to your vendor and you're going to identify, does this fit within what people do already? And aligning that is going to make the adoption of these systems and the change management much more easier.
All right. Okay, I think we've got time for one more question. So this person says, at my institution, we aren't large, but we are at the size where it's still possible to manage and integrate assets with our content management system platform and have an on-site IT support for storage and networking. What specific workflows or capabilities would a DAM provide beyond what a networked storage device or cloud storage can support?
Do you want
It's a
to take
great
that one,
question.
Jacques?
It is a great question. I think if you're NOS, supports discoverability and search. The way that DAMS work is really through the metadata, and they give you different ways to pivot around information and discover the things that are in your system. And I think um, if you layer that into your network access, and it's not just a kind of blank repository, but there is discoverability and searching. Another feature that I like about Terentia and why we use it and how it might differ from kind of just a blank repository um, would be the Lightbox feature, which allows us to take collections of assets and then share those externally through a URL so that people can then, so like say you're working with the press and you have a collection of images that you want to share with the press. It's almost like a Dropbox, but instead of having these siloed onto Dropbox or giving your press department a task of downloading and place, that's built into the DAMs. And so I think if those network access systems don't have those kind of features, then yes, that's certainly where the asset management system is gonna shine.
Oh, man, I really wish we could stick around longer. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much again, Molly and Jacques, and to everyone who's joined us today and participated in our polls and in the chat. Whether you're just thinking about a DAMS or you're already deep in the weeds of evaluations, I hope you're leaving with a little bit more clarity today and feeling a little less alone in the process as well. We'll be back on June 10th for our next webinar where we will be diving into AI policymaking for GLAM institutions and nonprofits, a conversation that is really increasingly becoming more urgent for a lot of us. You don't want to miss this. To make sure that you are the first to hear about that and any future Terentia webinars and events, follow us on social media, sign up for our newsletter. We've dropped the links in the chat. Thank you again, everyone. You take care and have a great rest of your week.